Hello to our San Marcos Unified School community. My name is Tiffany Campbell. I am the Assistant Superintendent of Instructional Services, and I have with me my counterpart, Mark Shield. Mark, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Mark Shield. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Business Services.
Today, we are happy to be able to share with you a question and answer session of questions that we received from our community members in the last several days. The following questions and answers are certainly not exhaustive. However, please feel free to sit back, relax for the next hour or so, and we will go through the vast majority of thematic questions that we are able to answer. At the end of this webinar, we will give you some other information about where you can get more information. And with that, we will begin our question and answer session. So Mark, first questions are going to you. We had a lot of safety questions come in, particularly as they relate to mitigation when we return to in-school. So first off, let's talk a little bit about plexiglass. So will students have to transport their plexiglass dividers? Will they clean the dividers between each class? Will they come home every night? Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening with the plexiglass?
Yeah, so great question. So our secondary students will carry these plexiglass dividers with them from one class to the next class. We will also be providing them cleaning instructions. So when they take those plexiglass dividers home with them in the evening, they will also have cleaning instructions on how to clean those from one day to the next. For our elementary students, they will not be required to take those home. They will actually be able to keep those right at the school. They will be cleaned and be ready for them when they come back to school the next day or whenever that day is.
So how extensive is the use of the plexiglass? For example, in this next question, will students be expected to use it while they eat their lunch? Will teachers have plexiglass barriers for their teacher desks?
Yeah, so right now the plexiglass dividers are really intended to be used in the classroom environment. So they would not be required in lunch, but really whenever they're doing their in-person instruction is when the plexiglass dividers would be. As for our teachers, at this time we have not purchased plexiglass barriers for the teacher desks. However, if a teacher does desire to have one for their desk, they can reach out to their site administrator, and then the site administrator will reach out to our district safety team, and we will do everything that we can to accommodate those requests.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. So we're going to continue on with you for a little bit and start talking about cleaning protocols, because there were several questions that came in about the protocols with cleaning. So first off, this question is specific to dance, but probably has some relation to, in general, those performance classes. So for a classroom that hosts dance, how will the floor be sanitized after each group of students? Will mirrors and bars be sanitized? And how will airflow or ventilation be addressed and given the same filtration and filter changes?
So Tiffany, as you know, the California Department of Public Health has some very specific guidelines in regards to many of our VAPA or our visual and performing arts classes. And our instructional services department is currently working with all of our secondary principals to determine how we are going to be able to operate and offer those VAPA classes with the guidelines that are currently in place from the California Department of Public Health. Once we have determined how we can move forward and meet those particular guidelines, then our maintenance and operations team, along with our safety team, will work with site administrators to determine the appropriate cleaning procedures that will be necessary in order to ensure a safe and healthy learning environment for those students.
Thank you, Mark. So this next question actually is very interesting and apropos. I was listening to an article, a news article on NPR just yesterday, I think, about playground equipment in the city in general. So why can't children play on playground equipment during recess? And it should be able to be sanitized in between cohorts like everything else they use.
Yeah, so again, the California Department of Public Health and local public health officials have recommended that any type of equipment that is shared should not be used. And so in this instance, it is true that we would be able to do the cleaning in between each of the individual cohorts, But in order for the playground equipment to really be used, it would have to be sanitized and cleaned after each individual person's use. And so as the result of that, that is the reason why we are not able to offer the playground equipment to be used at this time.
Thank you. Makes sense. And what about lunch tables? How are they going to be cleaned in between lunch sessions?
Yeah, the lunch tables will be cleaned between student cohorts. We will have our staff out there to do the necessary cleaning in between each of the individual student cohorts.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. More cleaning protocol questions. We had lots of those coming in. So, do kids sit in unclean desks and chairs in period 2 that were just occupied by other kids during period 1? And if so, this would mean that 3 or 4 interactions between kids and furniture would be there every day, correct?
Yes and no. So for our elementary students will be sitting in the same desk throughout the entire day. So they won't actually be switching from rooms to rooms. The kids will be staying in their rooms at the elementary school. So this question really shouldn't be an issue at the elementary school. At the secondary schools, we will be changing in between each of the individual periods. And we, as stated at our last special board meeting, we are working on protocols to have those classrooms cleaned and those desks cleaned during each of those individual periods during that change between those periods.
So thank you, Mark. And I think that actually kind of goes with the second question that's here, which is how are teachers expected to sanitize the classroom with only 10 minutes between classes? I know we had several questions and comments come in from our teacher community, and so they are thinking about how operations normally are during in-person instruction. So students linger in class to ask the teacher a question. They enter to talk to the teacher before starting a class. So do you think it will be business as usual? And how can teachers really do the sanitization of the classroom?
I think if there's anything that we've learned in this COVID-19 pandemic situation is that business as usual is kind of going by the wayside at this point in time. I don't think there's anything that is business as usual right now. We did talk about at the special board meeting that one potential option would be for teachers to assist us in wiping down those desks and light switches and those different things in the room that were used by the students. One potential option was to have teachers do that in between the class period in order to have that done quickly and have that room as safe as possible for when the next group of students come in. We, of course, will continue to work with our labor partners, in this case, the San Marcos Educators Association, to determine how and if we are able to do this and come to an agreement on the best way to happen so that way it meets teacher needs and also meets our staff and student needs as well.
Thank you. Okay, how about water fountains? Will water fountains be available? And then who will open and close the windows?
Yeah, so water fountains, again, is something that would be shared. And so those water fountains, just like the playground equipment, are not going to be available on a day-to-day basis. But I will say that our maintenance and operations team and our facilities department right now are working on having bottle filling stations installed on our school campuses. They aren't going to be replacing all of the water filter or all of the water fountains, but we are going to be having bottle filling stations installed on all of our school campuses to offset the water fountains that won't be available. In regards to windows being open and closed, teachers will have the ability to open the windows in their classrooms. In addition to that, the other staff on the campus. And then at the end of each day, before the last person leaves at the end of the day, we will be making sure that all windows are closed and locked before the building and the last person leaves at the end of the day, before turning out the lights, if you will.
Nice. Okay, we've heard a lot about these foggers. I've seen them in various places now. So can you tell us some information about the fogger, since it's going to be a new product to us?
Yeah, so the foggers are new, but they're new to us, but they're not new in many industries. So the foggers that we have purchased are very similar to the foggers that are used in many industries right now, and most notably in the airline industry. They use these before to sanitize the plane down quickly before the next round of passengers gets on the plane. These are very similar to those types of foggers. I know the question asked, will we be able to provide more information to the community? Yes, we are in the process of gathering some additional information regarding those foggers, and we will share that with the community in the near future.
And can you respond to that last part of the question in terms of, is it proven for this fogger to actually kill the COVID-19 virus?
Absolutely. So the foggers, the way that they work is it emits a mist, that mist then falls down onto your frequently touched surfaces, and then cleans and sanitizes that frequently touched surface, and makes that a sanitized environment from the time that it uses it until the next time. So yes, it does work.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. You know,
Okay.
the next question is actually for you. We'll switch it up a little bit, and that's in regards to outdoor space. So we heard about this at our special board meeting and in different avenues where we are, and that we have been, where people are wondering, do we have any plans to offer any outdoor classroom facilities?
So this is an interesting question, Mark, because we've been hearing about this idea of using outdoor space from other districts. If you go to the news, you may see news articles about various schools having class outdoors. And so on one hand, yes, it makes sense in terms of having access to the outside air. We understand that there is definitely an advantage to being outdoors in terms of the spreading of the virus. However, on the other hand, there's the other piece of what is best for instruction for kids and for teachers. So really the most important thing that we really want to think about is that our teachers and our students have access to all of the materials, all of the equipment that they need for instruction. They have whiteboards that are available. They have their video that's available for them. They have their dot cams that are available. This becomes very difficult in an outdoor classroom setting. Does this mean that teachers will never go outside to have class reading outdoors? Certainly not. I think our teachers will have that opportunity and ability to be able to use the outdoors as necessary, but also as appropriate for their instruction on any given day.
Great, thank you.
So, Mark, I'm going to flip it now on you for the second part of this question, which is really, how do schools plan to utilize outdoor space to minimize exposure, or will teaching solely be indoor inside classrooms? And really my question with this is, are there any limitations or guidelines about teaching outdoors or using outdoor buildings or facilities?
Yeah, I think that there are certain aspects of a normal instructional day that lend itself to being outdoors in a minimized risk situation. So for example, you might have lunch outside. Certainly we have PE outside. And so those types of activities that are normally happen outside from a day-to-day basis, I think we would still do those to the greatest extent possible. Also recess, and again, we wouldn't be able to use our playground equipment, but still it's important at our elementary level to have access to recess time, getting those wiggles out, if you will, before and in the middle of the break. And so I think that there's some opportunities for us to use that outdoor space, so that way we get those kids out of the classroom for a period of time, get some fresh air, get outside. We used the phrase earlier, business as usual. I would say that would be 3 potential areas where it would be business as usual, and taking advantage of that outdoor space as much as possible.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Okay, lots and lots and lots of questions came through about screening protocols and symptoms. And I think this may have been the #1 question that we had, which is, why are we not taking the temperatures of students?
Yeah, so I think it's important to remember that the California Department of Public Health and our local public health officials have stated that they do not recommend it and it is not required to have the temperature of students taken before coming on campus. And as we did say at our special board meeting, it is recommended and required to have adults have their temperatures come on campus. And so I recognize the fact that that seems like a double standard. And so as the result of that, the district is still considering this as a daily requirement in regards to taking the temperatures of our students before they are permitted to come on campus. And we will have more information for you about this in the near future.
Okay. And then for temperature checks, can we take temperature readings from the wrist or the elbow instead of the forehead?
So I know that this has been one of those concerns that's been out there is, this potential that there is harm by doing temperatures by foreheads. And I've seen a whole lot of evidence that says there's no real risk to using the forehead. And I've heard a couple news articles that have said that there may be a risk. At this point in time, the touchless thermometers that the district has purchased require the use of the forehead in order to take that temperature. We are, again, reaching out to our local public health officials to see if there's any additional guidance in regards to the reliability of taking that temperature at the wrist or at the elbow. I know whenever I go to the doctor, they don't take the temperature at the wrist or the elbow. They take it either by the forehead or, the ear or the mouth. And certainly we're not recommending doing the ear or the mouth. But those are the common ways that the medical community takes those temperatures is by the forehead. So I've never seen it by the wrist or elbow, but we are reaching out to the local public health officials.
Thank you. So a teacher is sent home to quarantine because they show a symptom. What happens to that teacher's students on that day and the subsequent 10 days of quarantine?
Well, I think, Tiffany, this is a little bit of a question for both of us.
Yes.
In regards to what happens to the teacher and the potential quarantining or isolating, but then also what happens with the students who may or may not be quarantining and isolating during this. And I think what our community needs to remember is that all of these symptoms or all of these situations, and we have several of them on the slides ahead, all of them happen on a case-by-case basis. And so there is no one answer that is the universal answer for every individual instance. There is always going to be a case-by-case situation in order to determine the accurate outcome of those results. But certainly in this instance, if a teacher was required to go home, the next question, though, is what happens to the students? And assuming the students were not required to quarantine, then what happens to those students that teacher would normally be teaching? Would there be a substitute teacher or would there be some other type of an arrangement made?
So we like to think about this in terms of what is going to be the least disruptive to the students' education. So if this were, I'm going to go back to, if this were in normal times and a teacher was ill and they were ill for a long period of time, they were not able to be in front of their students for a long period of time, we would have a substitute. I think because we are not in normal times, it will be, Mark, as you mentioned, on a case-by-case basis. If a teacher thinks they can do remotely, that's a possibility. However, I would say from our end, we really want kids to have an instructor in front of them when they are in class. So with that is the case, it is more likely than not that we would use a substitute. The district has substitutes available to us now. We are currently using substitutes. When we get back to in-person, we will continue to use substitutes. So that is my initial thinking on the matter. But as you said, what the situation is may be something different if the time comes.
Great.
Okay, thank you. We continue on with screening and protocols and symptoms. What will you do if someone is exhibiting COVID symptoms or flu symptoms such as coughing and sneezing? Will they be sent home? What if they can't or won't get a COVID test?
So again, I sound like a little bit like a broken wheel here, but current local public health guidelines state that if you have one of these symptoms that are COVID-related symptoms, and that includes, coughing or sneezing, congestion, that you're to not come to school during that period of time, and that would be staff and students, and you're to stay home for about 10 days. That last part of the question, though, is what if they can't or won't get a test? And in most instances, and we're going to talk a little bit about employee testing, but in regards to these symptoms, we can encourage an employee and a staff and our students to get tested. We can share with them information where they could get free tests if they need access to free tests, but we can't force anybody to get that test. And we also can't force anyone to share the information with us. And so really what this is going to require is a collective effort among our entire community to work together to share that information that needs to be shared, so that way we can, as the district, work on and ensure the health and safety of all of our employees. Certainly there's going to be some individuals that don't want to get tested, and they have that right to not get tested. There are others that will get tested, and we encourage them that when they do, if there's results that need to be shared, please share those with the district, so that way we can, again, ensure the health and safety of all of the staff and students of our district community.
So what happens when someone doesn't disclose symptoms because they think they're minor?
Yeah, so in that instance, you're really putting at risk our community. And we understand that your situation, you might know that it might be a minor situation, or you have a, this is a typical health condition for you. The California Department of Public Health recommends that if you have something that's considered a chronic health condition, to get a doctor's note and then provide that to the school districts. That way we can document that, and then we wouldn't be as worried about those symptoms if that is a chronic health condition for you. But it's really going to be important to disclose that information, as I said, so that way we as a group, as our community, can ensure the health and safety of everybody, because we want San Marcos Unified to be as safe as possible for all of our students and staff.
Thank you. So this is just some clarification, and there were a couple of questions on this. So on page 7, under the daily health screening protocols, it says that a child must stay home until they have a normal temperature for 24 hours. But it also says, and at least for 10 days. Can you clarify how long a student needs to stay home?
Yeah, so that that time period is really dependent upon whether or not they get a COVID-19 test or not. So if they get the COVID-19 test and it comes back negative, then they can come back sooner. If they don't get the COVID-19 test, then they need to stay out for up to 10 days or until their symptoms have subsided.
Okay. All right, we're going to move off of screening, but Mark, we're going to keep you on the hot seat. And we're going to talk about social distancing. And I actually, too, would be happy to kind of chime in with these, because some of these have to do with how we're going to manage social distancing on campuses. So the first one is, how is social distancing of students going to realistically be enforced and maintained between classes, traveling hallways, standing in lines, etc.? And how are we ensuring that all students are wearing a mask at all times listed above?
Yeah, so that first part of the question in regards to the social distancing, I will say that our COVID-19 safety team is working with our site administrators to determine on a site-by-site basis what can we do to help support them in ensuring this social distancing aspect. We certainly know that signage is important, just that visual reminder of maintaining 6 feet of distancing. In some instances, maybe there is a one-way hallway, reminding people to walk on the right side of a hallway, so that way, instead of using one-way hallways, maybe keep to the right and cut down on that commingling, if you will. And so our safety team is working with the site administration in order to help them through this process to develop a strong plan on a site-by-site basis. What is appropriate at an elementary school, like a San Marcos Elementary, is going to look greatly different than what is appropriate and workable at a school like a San Marcos High School. And so that plan will be tailored to each of those individual schools. And in regards to that last question there, in regards to wearing masks at all times, again, it's that collective community working together to ensure the safety of everybody. And also reminding them that there are certain individuals that are not going to be able to wear a mask because of some other underlying health condition, and they are exempt from wearing that mask. And so also working with our community to remind them of those instances as well. And, whether it be a mask or a face shield, making sure that we have the proper PPE out there. And it's not just the masks and the face shields, but it's really all of our PPE, making it available for our staff and students, and again, collectively working together for the safety of our entire community. Anything you want to add on that, Tiffany, from a former principal?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I think that when you speak of collective responsibility, it's super important. One of the things we were able to do last week is have a student forum where we talked to many high school students about all things about return to school. And one of the topics was on mask wearing and social distancing. And I have to tell you that I was hugely encouraged by our students who said, you know what, in many ways, we are our brother's keeper in terms of we have to help with monitoring and policing our friends who want to be silly and say, I don't want to have a mask on, or let me see how close I can get before a campus supervisor comes and tells me something. Part of this is, yes, we will have the supervision, we will have more adults out, we will have all of the extra arrows, etc. But also part of it, and a large part of it, is our students taking responsibility for making sure that their masks are on, making sure that they are being properly social distanced. One of the things I can say is that our secondary kids in particular really, really, really want to be back at school. And they understand that that can be jeopardized when someone is not doing what they are supposed to be doing. So while we certainly aren't putting responsibility on kids to police each other, I think our kids are putting responsibility on themselves to do the right thing. And our principals, our assistant principals at our secondary schools in particular, are really working with our kids and their kids about, when we come back, this is what it needs to look like. And if you don't want to go back home to remote learning, this is what we have to do. So I am encouraged, certainly. In the end, ultimately, we're going to see what happens, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, and I guess, Mark, this is just a little, I don't know if you have any more information about specifically during lunchtime, mask off for kids when they are eating, and what does that look like?
Yeah, masks will definitely be off during lunchtime. Kind of hard to eat through a mask. I tried this afternoon, it didn't work. So masks will definitely be off. But again, it comes back to this idea that we are working together on this, and safety is important. And we are, again, working with our site administrators to determine on a site-by-site basis, what is the best way for us to ensure the social distancing of our students, giving them a safe environment to eat, giving them an opportunity to, be kids a little bit, if you will, outside that normal instructional time, but also remembering this is a serious time as well, and we need to ensure the safety of students. And so whether we are eating on blacktops, or we're using the green spaces, where we're using our picnic benches or other tables that we have on the outside. I could certainly see in some instances also there may be areas set up on the inside of our schools, and also to eat in all of those atmospheres, creating a safe environment for our students to eat with their masks off.
Excellent, thank you. Okay. Let's talk about PPE, shall we? So
Absolutely.
what are the just a little bit, we'll talk about
just
PPE.
a little bit.
So So first question is, what are the protocols for one-to-one staff safety when working with bodily fluids? They're not able to socially distance. What type of PPE will you be giving to those staff members?
Absolutely. So the easiest answer is any and all PPE that staff person thinks that they need, we will have it available for them. We heard in a recent meeting that I was in from some instructional aides that they inquired about disposable gowns to be able to wear over their clothes. And so we actually have our purchasing department right now, and again, our COVID-19 safety team that are researching different types of disposable gowns that might be available. We're also working with our district nurses on this in order to determine what kind of, is this another type of a PPE area, not required by the California Department of Public Health, but we recognize that some of our staff may find this of comfort to them and something that they would like to use. And so we are currently looking at those types of things. So we are continuing to provide PPE. We are continuing to acquire more of it and making sure that we have it available for our staff on a day-to-day basis and filling those requests on a case-by-case basis.
So a lot of questions have come up, and I think it's mainly because our parents are a little nervous about coming back, right? So they hear that our schools are going to have, they're going to have. So the question that we have been getting a lot is the PPE here? Have the schools been provided with their partitions, with shields? Have things been installed? And if they have not, what's the timeline for having those items in place?
The first thing is regarding those partitions, those desk shields. The partitions are here in our office environments. They've already been installed. I know we get requests for more and more of them on a daily basis. And so we first started out with taking an observation of ourselves of the most frequently visited areas on each school campus where the public is interacting with staff the most. And so we installed the partitions there first. And then we also let the site administration know that if any of their staff had a desire for additional partitions above and beyond that, please let us know and we will work with them to acquire those partitions. I happen to know that at one school alone, I think we provided an additional 20 partitions last week, and then they requested another 10 or 15 of them again this week. And so we're still working on that with the partitions. In regards to the desk shields, and happy to report that we have all of our desk shields here. They are ready for student use. Many of them have already been delivered out to our schools. Others are still waiting to be delivered, but all of them are within the district and we will have them available when students return to school, and we are all looking forward to that. In regards to other types of PPE, again, as talked about in our special board meeting, I think it was on September 4th, we talked about other types of PPE that have been purchased and we're still buying more of. Some of those being both disposable face masks, we have face shields, we have those touchless thermometers, about 400 of those. We have bought more than 8,000 gallons of hand sanitizer that should last us at least through the winter break, and then we will go ahead and buy more hand sanitizer for after the winter break through the rest of the school year. Those are in 1 gallon containers with a pump on them, and we will also be able to replenish those whenever it becomes available. We have gloves that are available. We are currently researching other types of gloves that are available. And of course, we're still looking at the cloth face masks as well. So we have a large number of PPE already here. We are in the process of buying more of it just because we know we're going to need it. And then that last thing that I talked about at the special board meeting, and I know when I said it, I even got a couple eyes kind of tweaking up a little bit, like, why are we talking about paper bags? And the California Department of Public Health guidelines clearly state that when a student takes off their mask, it should be placed into a brown paper bag. And so we are currently looking for brown paper bags that we will be able to have available for our students on a day-to-day basis. So that way, when they take their face mask off, they'll do it at least once a day to eat. They can take it off, put it in that brown paper bag, and then when it's time to put it back on, they can take it out of the brown paper bag and put it back on, and then put the mask back on. Just another way to go ahead and ensure that that face mask stays clean for the student to wear on their face.
Excellent. Okay, we are going to move out of the PPE realm and into what is the piece that is probably most concerning for our parents and our staff, which is testing and positive cases. What happens if? So, first question, why are only 50% of staff members going to be tested every month? Why not 100%?
Yeah, so again, California Department of Public Health guidelines state at least 50% of your employees should be tested monthly. And so that's where that number came from. It wasn't Tiffany and I playing darts and, we ended up on 50%, the 50% number more frequently than any other number. It really is a California Department of Public Health guideline. And so we're just following those guidelines, just the 50%. Could we do more? We would need to work with the local public health officials and San Diego County, who has contributed significant funding for this testing, and we thank them for that. We would need to reach out to them to see if we would be able to do more than the 50% minimum requirement.
So with 50% of staff members, how do we choose what 50% get tested? And can you opt out?
Yeah, so we're the choosing, we're going to delegate that to you, Tiffany, and you get to choose.
Dartboard? Okay.
So really on this one, we're waiting for additional guidance from the California Department of Public Health to determine that selection process. My prediction is that it is going to be some percentage of each individual school rather than we're going to test 100% of 5 schools and then do the other 100% of the other 5 schools the next month. I really anticipate that this is going to be a mixture of or a subset of each school population on a monthly basis. Can teachers opt out? I have seen nothing in guidance so far that allows teachers or any staff to opt out of this required testing.
Mark, that's really helpful information, actually. So what happens if a sibling, a parent, a household member tests positive, but the student themselves are not showing signs?
So I am going to, again, sound like a broken record. And again, all of these are on a case-by-case situation. But based upon the facts that are here, it is likely that that student would be having been identified as a close contact. And the close contact as identified by the California Department of Public Health is less than 6 feet of distancing for more than 15 minutes. And so it's very reasonable to assume that a student in their household where a parent or a sibling has tested positive, that they probably would have been identified as a close contact. And in so that instance, they would be somebody, whether probably their medical provider, if it wasn't somebody in the district, would be reaching out to them, letting them know how long that they needed to quarantine and isolate before being able to return back to school.
Okay. And since you finished with quarantine or isolation from school, for all, is it 10 calendar days or 10 school or business days? Yeah,
that's a great question. So when this guidance was put out, days is reflective of calendar days, not school days. So in all instances when we are referring to days, it is always calendar days, not school days.
Thank you. We're going to continue on this line of questions regarding COVID and positive cases. So when will teachers and staff start being tested? Since none have been tested at this point, classified staff have been mandated to show up at the school site since August 11th without having any COVID testing offered so far.
Yeah, just like we're waiting for guidance on how to do that selection, we're also waiting for additional guidance on when this testing is going to start.
And what happens if a student tests positive for COVID? Will all of their teachers and all of the students in their classes be quarantined? Will all of these people need to be tested for COVID? And will the district be paying for the testing?
So again, great question. And I think that this is a great reminder to, again, say that this is based upon and assuming that the student or the student's parents communicate this positive test. If someone tests positive and that communication never happens, then all of the things after that the district would do aren't going to be able to happen because we didn't know. And so this really requires, again, for that collective community safety, sharing this information. So one, we can help the rest of the community respond accordingly. But two, the student, if they tested positive, isn't going to be in school for a while. And so we also want to make sure that there is no learning loss as well, and that we can support this student and all other students in ensuring that they receive their day-to-day instruction as well. So that communication is really, really important. What will be that next step? So assuming that we receive that communication, the next is that the district safety team will initiate our contact tracing protocols. And that contact tracing protocols will really be working with site administration. In this case, since it's a student, also reaching out to the parents to ask them, do you know who your student, your child, has come in contact with that we may need to notify? Again, in this close contact, less than 6 feet of social distancing, more than 15 minutes of that close contact, so that way we can notify the appropriate individuals. It might be teachers, it might be staff, it might be multiple classrooms, again, depending upon who that individual has come in contact with. We will then send that communication out to those appropriate individuals. And also in that letter, it will include potential next steps, which first and foremost being that you need to self-quarantine and isolate. Second is available resources that we as a school district have available to you. Also, if you need a location for a free test, we have a phone number as well as a location where you, and here in North County, can go get a free test. It's right over at Cal State University San Marcos. So we're very lucky to be able to have a location that is so convenient to our community, as well as a phone number where you can call to get more information. So all of that is included in that communication that we would send out to our staff as well as our parents and guardians.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
You're not done with COVID testing and
I thought I was off the hot seat by now.
No, not yet, my friend. I'm sorry. So what will be the protocol for kids and employees who are exposed to someone with a positive COVID test? Will they need to stay home until they get their own COVID results?
So again, it comes back to that contact tracing that we just talked about. We will notify who has to be quarantined, and also on a case-by-case basis based upon that close contact. I will say in many instances, we talked earlier about if you have a symptom, maybe a runny nose or congestion or something like that, or a fever, and you go get tested. In that instance, if you get a negative test, you get to come back sooner. But in this particular instance, if you have become identified as a close contact of an individual and you go get tested and it still comes back negative, that doesn't shorten your quarantine or isolation period. You're still required to stay out for that entire period of time because that negative test is as of that point in time. And so the California Department of Public Health guidelines state that even in this instance, when you've come in contact with someone who has tested positive, that does not shorten your time, your quarantine and isolation time.
Thank you, Mark. That is super important information. And will you say one more time what close contact means?
So that definition of close contact, again, this is not the San Marcos Unified School District definition of close contact. This is from the California Department of Public Health. And so that definition of close contact is less than 6 feet of interaction for more than 15 minutes. And so it's both of those. I did get a question from a parent recently that said, well, what about if a person's wearing a mask or not? That wearing of the mask is not a consideration in that close contact definition. It is just the 6 feet of distancing and more than 15 minutes.
Thank you.
Someone else asked me a follow-up question once and said, well, what if it's 13 minutes or 14 minutes? We're being very conservative about that. And if it's close, we're going to include that individual into that contact and into that notice because we would rather err on the side of caution than not.
Definitely. Okay. If a student or a staff member tests positive for COVID, how are parents notified? And will there be a public dashboard so we can see the numbers by school or site?
Great question. Great questions here. In that first question, we're going to use the same notification protocols that we have used in this district for quite some time. And so we're going to rely on those school messenger notifications and sending that information out to our parent community. To our staff, we will be using our district email and sending that information out in that way. I would encourage our parents, if you have a concern that you are not receiving emails from the district through that school messenger system, please call your site administrator for your children's school and update and verify the email address that you have on file. So that way we can make sure that if we need to get a hold of you, we can get a hold of you in this instance. It's going to be very, very important that we have an accurate email address on file. In regards to a public dashboard, again, it's not something that is required, but I do know that our district is going to be looking at the possibility of creating a public dashboard that is very easy to understand for a school-by-school basis that then we can share to the community.
Okay. Let's move on to mask. And I will jump in a little bit here with you as well. But this obviously, as you know, it's a hot topic. So first question, if desks are going to have safety guards up between each student, are students still going to have to wear a mask while in class?
At this time, yes. So I think it's important to remember that the safety partitions are not required. This is an added PPE, if you will, that San Marcos Unified is doing that is not required in the California Department of Public Health guidelines. And so it also does not state that if you have your mask on and you have one of these partitions that you are able to take your mask off. So at this time, we are saying that if you are sitting behind a student partition, that you are still going to have to wear your mask.
Okay. If special education preschoolers are not required to wear masks, will preschool aides and teachers be required to wear face shields as well as masks?
So again, it goes back to what we said before. We will certainly be providing the PPE and having that available to our students and to our staff. Certainly some of our student population is going to have more difficulty in wearing a mask than others, and especially in some of our special education populations. Yes, the aides and the teachers may wear a face shield. If they're wearing that face shield, they're still going to have to wear the face mask, or they could choose to not wear the face shield and just wear the face masks. They would have that option.
And did the district purchase masks for staff and students, or did they purchase gaiters?
So it's nice to know that someone was listening to me at a previous board meeting, and I think it was in the July or August board meeting, when I shared at that meeting that the district was looking at gaiters. And it was shortly after I made that comment, and I was working with our purchasing team, and we were finalizing a quote to buy about 25,000 gaiters, that a study came out from Duke University that raised some questions in regards to the effectiveness of gaiters based upon that study. And so I did some research in regards to that study, and I talked to other people that are far more scientifically and science-minded than I am. And as the result of that, we did step away from buying those gaiters. And we are now going to be purchasing, and we should have these purchased later this week. This is a sample of one. It is a 3-ply cotton cloth mask. It does have, I don't know if you can see it here, but it does have a bend in here a little bit. I think you can probably see it a little bit better if I show it this way. It has the nose wire in here. They come in both black and white. We are buying 2 of these for every staff and every staff member, and also for every student. I will say that we had gotten this as a sample, and I wanted to try it out to see how it was working. One of the things I like about this is it's soft on both sides, and we've gotten some of these samples that have come in that was kind of soft on the outside, but on the inside it was kind of scratchy. It was uncomfortable to wear. So we were looking for something. I won't say the vendor that we're using, but the vendor is a well-known vendor, and really happy with the product that we're going to be getting for these. So we're buying at least 2 of these for all staff members and for all students as well.
I'm going to jump to a question that's coming on the next slide, Mark, but I think it fits here, is can kids wear a mask from home?
Yes. So if students have a mask at home that they would like to wear, they are certainly permitted to wear that mask. Again, this comes back to that collective community benefit as well. And that is, we know, as I just said, some masks are better than others. And so we would encourage that if you are bringing a mask from home, that it is something that it's not a Kleenex. It's something that works and provides a barrier that will be beneficial for not only your child, but also for the other children in the classroom as well as our staff. But yes, students are permitted to wear their own mask from home.
Okay. And then it appears on the issue of masks that you're checking for masks when students arrive in class, not at the screening station.
Yeah, when I heard this one, I wasn't quite sure where this one was coming from, but no, the California Department of Public Health guidelines specifically say that, you have to be wearing a mask. I wear a mask when I'm just coming to the district office, and you and I aren't wearing them now because we are in our collective offices separately. In fact, in completely separate floors. And so that's why we don't have our masks on right now. So yeah, the mask will be required when they come onto the school campus, not once they get to the school or their individual classroom, but when they get out of the car or off the bus, that mask needs to be on.
Thank you. And I think we covered all of the pieces of this second question. So let's move to school closures. Why are we considering such a high outbreak percentage before reclosing schools?
Yeah, so again, this is not subjective. This was not, again, Tiffany and I playing darts. This was, again, guidelines that came down from the California Department of Public Health. And as a reminder, a school would be closed when 5% of your student and or staff population have a positive test within a 14-day period of time, and that's a rolling 14 days. In regards to a reclosure of the entire school district, the current guidelines state several different requirements. One of those is at least 25% of your schools have to be closed, and also concurrence to close from the local public health officials.
Okay. Volunteers on campus. This question actually just warms my heart, Mark, actually.
It does me too.
And it is a similar sentiment that we heard when we did some parent forums last week. So will parent volunteers in person ever be considered as an option? Parents who are comfortable bringing their children back may be able to help support their kids' classrooms in terms of assisting with cleaning or maintaining social distancing. We heard that actually a lot from our parent forums of, I will come and volunteer to clean. I would like to know if it meant that I would like to volunteer if it meant that I could bring my first grader back in person. So what's the deal with volunteering, Mark?
Yeah, so again, we're addressing this community safety and the safety of our staff, the safety of all of our students. And so I love our volunteers. It's one of the things that I've loved about San Marcos Unified since I've been here over 5 years, is hearing all of the stories and seeing all of the volunteers that are on our campuses from one day to the next. Like you said, it warms my heart because it just shows that desire to help out in ensuring the education of every single one of our students in very different ways. Unfortunately, right now, we are discouraging and not going to be allowed to require or permit volunteers on our campuses at this time. It's not because we don't want it. We could definitely use the help. But for right now, because things are so fluid, and in order to ensure the safety of our students and our staff, we cannot permit volunteers on our campuses at this time to help out. That would just create more people that would have contact with our staff and our students, which could potentially expose more of our community to an outbreak. And so we're trying to create that safe learning environment for our staff and students so that way we can have in-person instruction as much as humanly possible.
Okay.
It pains me to say that, by the way.
It pains me to hear it, Mark. It does, but I understand where the guidance is coming from, certainly.
And I think that leads us into me stepping off the hot seat, and we're talking about volunteers and instruction. And that's a great segue into, the various different instructional models that was discussed at our September 14th board or September 4th board meeting. And so, this first question, for the third model, which I believe was that A-B split, if I remember correctly, and that A-B hybrid, where TK and K students are in the classroom every day, would the number of students be limited to a certain number? And would they still be full day schedule or broken into AM, PM cohorts? How would that work?
This is a good question. And yes, Mark, I am now officially on the hot seat, so thank you for that. This third model is the AB model where TK and K would be on campus every day. So one of the things we want our parents to think about and remember is that with our, when we were in person, our TK and K models actually varied throughout the district. So we had some schools where TK and K were half day, some where K was whole day. That model is going to continue. So in speaking with our principals, all of whom really understand the importance of getting our littlest of littles back to school as soon as possible, they are looking at making their model specific to their school site. That also goes with the number of students that will be limited in class. And I say that because some of you may or may not know, if you have been a parent volunteer in one of your kids' kinder classrooms, you may recognize that oftentimes kinder classrooms are really large. Our 18-to-1 number at this point is based on a standard class size. If a classroom is much larger and can appropriately and safely handle more students than 18, still with at least 6 feet of distancing in between them, there may be 1 or 2 more kids in a kinder class or a TK class. But the number would not exceed what is safe or appropriate for social distancing, meaning that magic 6-foot number. Again, full day or half day really will depend on the school site that you are at. And I think, let's see, what else can I say about this? I think I've said it all, Mark, and I'm looking at the second question, and it's kind of really the same. It's really the same question.
Yes. Yeah, I think if I were to add anything to this question, it would be: is there any other cohorts, if you will, of students that are being considered to come to school on a daily basis, other than just our TK and K students?
That's a great question, and it's a question that we have gotten from parents and from teachers alike. TK and K for sure. As some of our elementary principals really, if they are able, would like to get first grade back on campus sooner rather than later. And there is a very large outpouring from parents, teachers, everyone really about our special education students, and particularly our students who have moderate to severe disabilities. That is a group of students that we recognize they need to have in person as much as possible. So that would be the other cohort that we are looking at coming to school longer or more often than just every other day.
Great. So this next question, right before the beginning of the school year started, we sent a survey out and we asked parents to choose year-long instruction or when in-person instruction is a viable option, that you choose virtual options. So we got a lot of questions that came in about this idea of, maybe I'm not ready for in-person instruction yet. I'm not ready to come back, or I don't like the model that was chosen, or a wide variety of those different types of questions. If I was a year-long instruction and now I want to, or if I was staying remote and then I have the ability to stay year-long, am my kid's going to have to switch teachers? And so, any thoughts on that?
I have a lot of thoughts on that. So let's kind of go in order and go from kind of the easiest answer to the more difficult answer. So first off, in thinking about will families have the opportunity to switch instructional models, here's what I know and I think we as a district really understand. We recognize that the reality of returning to school is going to cause some families to really want to reevaluate the instructional model that they prefer for their students. When we first surveyed about which model will you choose, it was a snapshot in time. And I can speak for myself, and I could probably speak for others as well, is we weren't quite sure of when that in-person return was going to come. And I think for some of us, it has come sooner than we thought it was going to come. So our immediate need and recognition is that we will be resurveying our families in anticipation of our phase-in of in-person learning. We think it's important for, one, our families to once again voice what model their preference is. We think it's also important for our principals to know how many students can they truly expect who want to be in person now that in person is coming relatively quickly, and how many students will really prefer to remain remote for the foreseeable future. So that surveying is coming pretty quickly here. Now here's the more difficult questions and the less comfortable questions. If I'm not comfortable sending my kids back, what options do I have? And do I have to move my students to a different teacher? Will my schedule change? So the reality of the situation is that schedules were made based on what our parents chose for their learning models. So if you chose remote instruction, you have a teacher, particularly at elementary, who is teaching remotely, who is a remote teacher, and there is not an indication that they will be going back in person. If you chose the in-person model, you were scheduled with the idea that you would be back in person. So what that means is, yes, we are resurveying, and yes, we want to know where you really are most comfortable and where you want to be. The reality of the situation is, however, that if you change models, there may be a chance that your student's schedule will change. Your ability to, part of that change is going to be based on, one, the number of families that are requesting the change, the availability of the teachers that are within the model, the space available at a particular school. So we want to be able to accommodate. We certainly understand that things change and circumstances change. But with that, we can't guarantee that I was an in-person and now I want to go to remote and I want to keep my same teacher. That simply may not be a possibility. And I think it's important for us to be transparent about that as you think about changing those models. We are at September 14th, but we are about a month in. Your students have now gotten to know their teachers. So that will also need to be a part of your thinking as you are deciding if switching models is something that you really want to do.
Before we move off the slide, Tiffany, this last question here really speaks to our secondary schools and really our high school schools, and that is this idea that maybe staying remote for the entire semester, and as this question is specifically, or for the entire year to allow their senior to graduate safely. So any thoughts about that specifically in regards to high school staying remote through the semester, or even seniors choosing, maybe changing their mind now and saying, I want to stay remote for the entire year, after originally saying, I want to come back to school when there is an original opportunity?
So second part of that question first, very much like our elementary model, students who choose to now go back to staying remote for the whole year, that will certainly be a possibility for them. What is a little unique about secondary that is not the case for elementary is that in our high school model, the 4x4 model, the entire year is completed at that first term. So students have their periods 1, 2, and 3. They will have completed those periods at the end of that first semester, which is actually the term. It is very much like the college model of everything, all my content is done in a term. So when we move to term 2, students will have completely new teachers, completely new classes. So in that way, it actually makes it a bit easier to move between models because now you aren't having to switch teachers. That's not something that you have to worry about. I will say that that is one of the reasons why the recommendation, if you remember at the special board study session, the recommendation was for secondary not to fully return until after the semester. Because one of the things that will make it very difficult to come back midterm is having to divide kids now into the A-B hybrid. It just becomes a bit more difficult to do, whereas we have a clean break at the semester. So looking at the question, I want to make sure that I have answered everything. Yes, you can remain in remote setup, certainly. And if you want to remain for the rest of the year, that is definitely a possibility as well.
This is a great segue into these next questions, and I'll take the first two of them first. And we talked about this a little bit already, but do current schedules allow the AB model to actually work without having to change the schedule? And then in the second semester, will any schedules need to be adjusted as the result of this AB cohort model that we're currently considering at our secondary schools?
So it's interesting, Mark, because we got a lot of questions on this. And I think these 4 really kind of summarize most of the questions that we got about the in-person schedule. And it really came down to broader categories. So will student schedules change when we begin the AB hybrid schedule? Will the cohorts be equal? And will remote instruction daily schedule change with a return to in-person? So the current schedules do allow for an AB model to work without having to change student schedule. Short answer, yes, this current schedules do allow for that. Will second semester schedules need to adjust? In high school, they certainly will adjust. They will be brand new schedules. Second semester for our middle schools may need to adjust, and it may be based on staffing for solely remote instruction. That generally is what will happen. So our goal is that students will not have to change their teachers at the secondary level, but it may be a reality that if particularly you are looking to change models, that your schedule will need to adjust.
So this next question is really interesting, and that's that, this whole idea of these cohorts is taking your population and splitting it into an A cohort and a B cohort. And so, on our schools, will we actually be able to divide our cohort into equal groups, 2 equal groups, that will then lend itself to not having more than 18 students in a classroom?
So our commitment is certainly that every class will have 18 or fewer students in it. That is no question. If based on the size of the rooms that we are talking about, it's 18 or fewer students. Can cohorts be divided into 2 equal groups? So I'm going to say it's going to be 2 equalish groups, simply based on it is the magic that our computer system does. It is the magic of our administrators who are doing the master schedule to create cohorts that are as equal as possible. With that said, in even back to normal times, we had classes that we were never equal, so to speak. So there were classes that were 20 and we had classes that were 38. That's just normal how master schedules work, particularly at the secondary level. However, what we are doing with this new circumstance of the hybrid and the AB model is really to look at how do we create that AB cohort that is as equal as possible. After we pull out the remote instruction students who will be remaining remote, we will for sure be ensuring that every class has 18 or fewer students.
So I have a follow-up question here for you. And I was in your office earlier today and I saw the softball that's on your bookshelf. So I'm going to throw you a softball here.
Okay, I'm waiting for the softball.
So the softball is, if I'm a parent and I have a student in elementary, middle, and high school, when you're working on these cohorting, what guarantees and does the district also going to make a commitment that my children will also all be coming to the school regardless of, if I've got an elementary and a high school, if they're a high school A cohort, they would also be in the A cohort at the elementary. Or when I'm looking at a possible one student being in an A cohort and the other one in a B cohort.
That is a softball, Mark. Thank you.
I told you.
Thank you.
That's a lob.
That is a lob. We certainly recognize that we do not want our families to be unequal within their households. So if you have an elementary school student and a middle school student and a high school student, our principals, our administrators have made that commitment that all of the household will be on the same model, will be on that same day, the same cohort day. It will mean some extra work, and they have already said that they are willing to do that extra work to ensure that they are communicating among each other, that the families are together within a cohort. One of the beauties of our scheduling software, and I will say our technology guru who is working in the background, is that he has already come up with what it will take to create the cohorts by family group. So there have been a lot of questions about, is it going to be, how are you making the cohorts? Really, the first is looking at the family groups and then splitting from there. So thank you for the softball. Yes, your kids will be together.
Great. Last question. What's the rationale for this Monday online when we're back to school?
Yes, we are back to school. One of the pieces that we talked about early on, back in June, back before when we were just doing our planning, was that we needed to be able to be nimble, because as you pointed out in your slides, Mark, there may be a possibility where schools have to close. There may be a possibility when the governor says, you know what, this is not working out how we thought it was, you have to close. So we really want to be able to be nimble and move quickly back to a remote instruction model. So we really do want our schedules to match. That Monday also gives our teachers and our students the opportunity really to look broadly at what will be happening during the week. I know it seems very strange that we're back in school and then we're not going to be back on Monday. But when you think about students, I have a 7th grade daughter, I'm going to say, who is really good at school, but she will have a hard time in thinking about, I'm in person on Monday, or I'm in person on Tuesday, I'm not in person on Wednesday. What am I supposed to do on Wednesday? So this Monday gives teachers and kids the opportunity to map out the week. So we still have that virtual time, that virtual remote instruction at the beginning of the week to map out, okay, when you are here on Tuesday, here's what you're going to do. Make sure when you are here, when you are at home on Wednesday, you are doing this. So really, it gives us both the ability to be nimble, but also gives us that chance to really help our kids be a little bit more organized as they go into this new hybrid structure.
And if I could add anything else on here, it's just that we have a lot of Monday holidays as well. And so by having this as a remote time as well, it also has an advantage by mitigating that potential learning loss by those being half days in that online period.
Definitely.
So I actually, my softball is the next slide. And so I forgot about that. And so we'll go ahead and skip this, and we're going to go straight to special education and safety protocols. You know, we've heard a lot of questions in regards to safety protocols for our special education population, both staff and students. And those questions are, you know, in the specialized program, it requires a hands-on work with our students to exhibit both unexpected behaviors and then just that close proximity with the students as well. And so how will we ensure that both of those students and staff will be safe? Will there be training? That's our first question.
So Mark, I think you mentioned it early in one of your earlier slides where we discussed that staff will get the PPE that they need for their situation. So we will be ensuring that additional safety protocols are in place, additional equipment that may be needed for teachers. I think about gloves, I think about face shields. Those will be assigned to our classroom personnel because we do understand that there is a difference when you are in close proximity to our most neediest of students. There will be training, of course. Staff will be trained prior to our students coming back regarding safety, regarding cleaning procedures. Our director of special education is working very closely with her teachers to make sure that everyone feels safe and feels comfortable with a return to in-person school. With that said, I will say that the vast majority of our teachers, of our parents really understand, I'm reiterating that our most vulnerable of students need to be in school as much as possible and as quickly as possible. So we will be doing everything we can to make sure that they are prepared and ready for when that shift occurs.
So many of our staff to support our students, they might help out or serve multiple different student groups maybe on a campus or on multiple different school campuses. So are there any limitations in place in regards to the number of sites or classrooms that any one staff member can interact with on a daily basis?
So Mark, currently there are no limitations that we know of from the California Department of Public Health or the local public health officials about the number of sites or classrooms that staff may visit. The information could be tracked for contact tracing purposes, obviously, but there is no specific limitation of a staff member can only go into one class or can only pull from 2 classes. With that said, however, we will be doing everything in our power to ensure that the number of classes and the number of contacts that our related service providers have is limited and is reasonable. The number of classes specifically will be determined the closer that we get to return. We will be following all CDPH guidelines, and we will be limiting them in both size and in scope. So we do not want our related services providers to feel like we are putting them in danger because because of what they are used to in normal circumstances. Again, we are not in normal circumstances, and we will shift what we are asking our related services providers to do and how many students we are asking our related service providers to work with based on what our current situation is.
One of the things I heard you say in the answer to that question was limiting size and scope. And so that kind of leads us into this next question. In understanding these safety protocols for our teachers and service providers, typically having students in multiple classrooms or running small groups of students in different classrooms, what safety protocols are going to be in place for that?
So this already we have been having discussions on, and we do not want students to be commingled between classrooms. So that is something that used to be done in normal circumstances that will not be done now. Teachers and related service personnel, they will work with their students that are clustered together, and will limit the number of classes each day. We'll have to do those same type of screenings and safety protocols that we will be doing normally. So temperature checks, we want to make sure will happen prior to entering classrooms or working with new groups. We'll follow all of the guidelines that are necessary. So we will go above and beyond with our safety protocols for this specific group of students, because we know it looks a bit different both for our service providers and for our students.
So we're going to leave special education, and we're going to talk about our non-campus days. In this AB model, our students are going to be home 2 days a week, 3 days a week if you count the Monday. And so we're going to having that full day at home, that 2 days when you're at home. What will be the expectation of students, and what support will those children need from their parents? Will that vary by teacher? Will it vary by site? Is it going to be a district-wide standard in regards to screen time versus pen and paper, pen and pencil assignments? And then what's the role of attendance and all that?
So there's a mouthful in that.
That is a mouthful. And the last one I'll say is I happen to know a friend of mine who was in instruction last week, and they did it from Catalina. So, I mean, how does all that work out together?
It's amazing, right, that we are in a different time. So first and foremost, our state daily instructional minutes they are fewer, but they have not been completely waived or eliminated. We continue to have daily instructional minutes and state minimum instructional days. So what that means is a non-campus day is not a non-learning day. That is the mantra. Our students will be in-person learning, or they will be at home asynchronously learning, okay? So as far as what that expectation is, there is learning all of those days. What may vary by teacher is what the assignments are. So our students, our teachers will be working in their PLC cohorts. They'll be working at school sites, as grade levels, really to think about and collaborate on how do we make sure that our instruction is congruent around our curricular and our instructional expectations. Teachers have already been, even before the school year started, they have been identifying their essential standards. They have been looking at their pacing guides. They know what assignments that kids need in order to move instruction forward and in order to move learning forward. I will say, as an interesting aside, a lot of the comments that we had come in from our teachers was, we really want to be able to provide high quality instruction when students are in person, and we want to be able to provide high quality asynchronous assignments to our kids on those off days. Our parents too were very concerned about this idea of a teacher being split, of having to think about what is instruction, doing their instruction both live and doing it remotely at the same time. That's a piece that we recognize that it's not optimal for kids and it's not optimal for instruction. So really our focus is going to be high quality synchronous when they are in front of you, and then high quality asynchronous. One of the pieces that gives us is this idea of screen time versus pencil and paper assignments. I think now that we have been 4 weeks, 5 weeks in, we are still calibrating as to what is the appropriate amount of screen time for students, and recognizing that even though we are fully remote, it doesn't mean that our students need to be on the screen for the full day of time. And I think I digressed a little bit. I apologize.
Yeah.
I will bring it back in, Mr. Shield.
Wow. Well, yeah. Hey, so just to clarify a little bit, and you alluded to this a little bit already, but on those 2 days that you're home full day, So will students be required to do both remote learning on those 2 days in addition to the remote learning on Monday as well?
At this point in time, our recommendation will not be for teachers to teach kids both in front of them in person and also doing Zoom work at the same time with kids on their off days. Optimally, we have heard pretty clearly from all of our stakeholders that their focus really needs to be on who is in front of them at that time. Does that clarify?
Yeah, it does clarify, and I think that leads us to that last question. So on these off days, who's going to monitor or oversee or meet with the students on that day, and who will be assigning content and work to do?
So I will go back to my initial statement when we got to this slide. And it is that our students will be learning every day, and they will be receiving content and instruction from their teacher every day. That content and instruction will either be synchronous while they are in front of them, or they will be doing high quality asynchronous assignments when they are at home, not directly in front of the teacher. So who will monitor and oversee? The teacher is responsible for their full cohort of students. Yes, it's broken into A and B, but ultimately the teacher is responsible for all of their students and the learning for all of their students.
We're going to leave now non-campus days, and we're hearing about all these plans. Now let's talk about time, phases, and when is all this going to happen? So we talked a little bit about this earlier, but are there any plans to give students in special ed priority for in-person learning?
Yes, and 1,000 times yes. We have talked about it. We have talked about it previously. Our administrators are really in favor of it. Our teachers are in favor of it. Our parents are in favor of it. And even our state gives us guidelines of unique student populations that we need to consider, and how we are ensuring that their learning we have a true continuity in their learning, and special education students are part of that unique student population.
When we closed down last school year on March 13th, our seniors last year got the rest of their school year shortchanged in regards to those end of the year activities, that in-person instruction that happened at the end of the year. And so it doesn't surprise me that we got questions that came in that said, what about our seniors this year? Are seniors being considered for phased in either this semester or being considered for next semester as part of this special population of students that to consider about bringing back on campus sooner than everybody else?
I will not speak for our two high school principals, but
Why not?
Because I am respectful of both Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Dawson. Mr. Shield. However, what I will say is that our principals, our administrators at our high schools are so concerned and sympathetic about how difficult this whole COVID mess has been on our seniors in particular. I am sure that our individual school sites will be working with their school communities to bring back small groups of students that are based on their context. Those small groups could be seniors, could be ASB, could be CTE students. They really want to tailor those small groups to what their school communities are asking for. As a former high school principal, I know that we need our seniors need to feel connected for their final year of school. So I think whatever we can do to help with that, our principals will be willing to do.
But in reality, there is some complexities here, because a student who is enrolled in an English class in all likelihood is not in there with just seniors. There are juniors in this class and seniors and, maybe a sophomores in the class. And so in some of your core classes, there are some and I would say probably in most classes, there are some complexities in regards to the instructional master schedule, because the class in all likelihood is not just made up of seniors.
Very true, Mark. And that's a great point. And a good clarification, I think, particularly for this first semester, this first term. I don't foresee that seniors coming in or those small groups of kids coming in will be getting direct instruction from their teacher on this initial phase in when we think about bringing small groups back. I can certainly see this initial wave coming in really is more about getting them on campus in small groups. Perhaps it is the ASB who's meeting after school in a small group. It could be a CTE doing a lab in an outside of instructional time. As you mentioned, the layers of complexity with the high school schedule is vast. At minimum, it is vast. It is a true puzzle and a conundrum. What our administrators have said, however, is that we recognize that there is this complexity, but we also know that we have to get kids back in. So how do we do that while still ensuring that instruction is still happening? So that's where we are right now.
And I think part of that connectedness that we're talking about is in regards to clubs and athletics. And I know as a former high school principal, you spent a lot of time with the clubs and with the athletics. I've been meeting with our athletic directors, trying to come up with a plan and how we might move forward with athletics. I know you've been well aware of what's going on the club route. So where are we at this point in time with clubs and athletics and maybe being able to meet in a small group setting?
So similar to what we were talking about just a minute ago, this idea of who can we bring back together, small clubs together, socially distanced, obviously. Excuse me. Our ASB coming together in small groups. We do want to begin that getting kids back on campus and allowing them really to begin to reconnect with each other. We think that's important. Mr. Shield, I'm going to have you take over.
Yeah, so, I will remind Dr. Campbell right now that proper coughing is in your elbow. And so as she's stepping away, we'll let her clear her throat. But I think the important thing here is in regards to these clubs and the athletics is we want to make sure that we have a safe environment for our clubs and our athletics. We really want this to be an opportunity for our students to be able to connect with other students on the campuses. And so we will be doing that to the greatest extent possible. Specifically within the athletic programs, we have been working with CIF and other school districts in the county to identify various protocols that we can have in place for the athletic programs. And so one of those is at our September 4th board meeting, we rolled out a preliminary schedule and how our athletic teams could come back on campus into some type of a organized conditioning type activities. We are not ready to start that yet. We are getting very, very close, but that would allow those teams that are getting ready for in-person practice later in December. I believe CIF has identified that date as December 12th. And so we are going to continue refining those conditioning activities and hopefully be able to start those very soon for those sports, those traditional fall sports that are slated to start practice in December 12th. So we will be working on that as well. Tiffany, are you okay now?
I am okay now, and I promised I passed my screening, including my temp check, when I came in this morning.
And we saw you use the hand sanitizer.
My hand sanitizer.
This is a full educational webinar right now.
Exactly.
So a couple more questions for you, and then we will call it a day. So will students be required to bring their Chromebook, textbooks, and partitions to school every day?
Okay, so when we think about this, It really is about our students will be required to bring what is necessary for them to participate in their learning on a daily basis. Part of this will depend on what their teachers are requiring them to bring. So I think at minimum, yes, they will need to bring their partition to school every day. We talk to our students about this piece actually as well in terms of what do I have to bring? You have to bring your partition. What if I forget it? There will be a limited number at our school sites, but this needs to become part of your regular routine. When you leave the house, do I have my mask? Do I have my partition? Chromebooks will be likely that they should be bringing. We will not be doing shared Chromebook carts that we have done in the past, specifically now because all of our kids have a Chromebook of their own. So if the teacher is requiring you to use your Chromebook, then you will need to bring that Chromebook from home. One of the things that we have heard from our teachers, however, is that if they have the opportunity to have their kids in front of them, they likely will not be using a Chromebook because we have used Chromebooks so much with our remote instruction. Same will go for textbooks. Again, we will not be sharing textbooks. We will not be using class sets of textbooks. So if your teacher requires you to bring a textbook, you will need to bring the textbook. Our teachers do understand, however, that kids will have a lot to carry, and they've always understood that. So it will not be every day you have to bring all of these items, but when your teacher requires them, you will need to bring them.
And just one clarification there, you had mentioned earlier partitions coming back and forth every day. That's with the exception of elementary students. Elementary partitions will stay at school every day, but the secondary students would be required to bring their partition to school every day, correct?
Exactly.
These last two questions are really connected. And so, what's the plan of getting everybody on the same page? Or worse, what's the way of maintaining everybody on the same page if we stay in this remote instruction? And then the third part of that is for our students who are normally fine, the students that are coming to school and, they're in that routine and they don't require a lot of oversight. What are we putting in place to also ensure that they don't fall behind?
I think this is a great question, and I love the fact that we actually are ending on these two questions because this is the priority for us as a school district. It is how are we maintaining a level of instruction for our students? How are we ensuring every day that our kids are learning? I have talked with so many who really recognize that this is going to be a generation of students that we are going to be continually chasing remediation and acceleration for. They have lost so much time since we closed in March. And as an instructional person and one who really, when you look at the research, you recognize the importance of the social aspect of learning, it becomes really important for us to do a few things. One, it's to identify where our kids are right now. So when your kids came back to school, one of the priorities in our elementary all the way and our middle schools and all the way through was to really get our kids a diagnostic. And we needed to diagnose them in literacy, that's English, and in numeracy, in math, because those are the two pieces that will carry them throughout their learning, no matter what grade level they are in, and as they move into college. So our focus this year is going to be on remediating that literacy piece. I apologize.
You're fine. So that is there, as Tiffany was saying, that is a focus of ours this year, is ensuring for all of our students, remediating that learning loss, and making sure that we've got some systems in place to meet those individual student needs. Elementary, middle school, high school, our special needs population, our preschool special needs students that are even going to be coming into our school for the very first time, making sure that we are meeting those needs and addressing that learning loss that we know is occurring as the result of this different type of a learning environment. Tiffany, anything else you want to add there?
I'm going to try, and I'm going to try not to choke. As you mentioned, really, it is intervention plans, but it's also acceleration plans as well. I am the mother of a 7th grader, as I have said, who is in our school district, Go San Marcos Middle School. And she has been one who has been, always been one who has loved school. And I've talked to many of our parents who I empathize with, who see their kids through continued remote instruction really begin to lose the motivation, who begin to lose just that connection to learning that they once had. So in addition to the bread and butter instruction of math and reading, we really also are incredibly focused on the improvement and the maintaining of the social emotional well-being of our students, because the two are intertwined so much. And I think more so than we even thought, we can now see how important it is for our students not only to have the reading and writing and math, but also be able to have that other aspect, that social aspect, in order to truly learn and truly move forward in their instruction. And so with that, I think I am done. Mark.
So I want to say thank you very much to our San Marcos Unified community who has reviewed and watched this webinar and stuck with Tiffany and I over this last hour plus. Yes. We might be going on 90 minutes now at this point in time. Yes. But I want to say thank you. Thank you for the hundreds and hundreds of comments and questions that we received through the portal that we had set up. We didn't answer every single question, and we acknowledge that. But we also know that these questions that we answered today are a universal representation of all of the questions. And many of them were repetitive and very similar in nature in both their comments and their questions and their concerns. And so we have combined those together and answered as many of them as we could as possible. We'd also like to take this opportunity to remind all of you that we have a governing board meeting tomorrow on Tuesday, September 15th. That governing board meeting will be at 6:30 p.m. It will be remotely, as our board meetings have been over the last several months. And we invite you to go ahead and attend our board meeting. You can find the link for that on our school district website, which is smusd.org. And with that, I don't think there's anything else. Tiffany, do you have anything?
No, I just like to repeat Mark's thank you and appreciation for all of your feedback, all of your input. It really has made a difference as we move forward in our discussion of what our in-person plans will be. I do encourage you to tune into our governing board meeting, because that is where we will be discussing with our board part 2 of our reopening plans, and our board will be making a decision on where we go as we move forward. So again, thank you. Thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for sticking through my coughing fit. I apologize. And Mr. Shield, I want to say a particular thank you to you. You've been a great partner in crime through our 90 minutes. And with that, I think we're good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Have a great night.
Bye.